Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with Eduardo Vilaro. He is the artistic director and the CEO of Ballet Hispánico. I'm delighted to have him here with me today. He has just celebrated his 15th year, I believe, as artistic director. He has such a vast background I can't wait to dive into. But so I don't keep my listeners waiting, welcome Eduardo to Dance Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Absolutely. What I'd like to do for my listeners is I'd like them to really get an idea of who my guest is. So I always like to invite my guests to give a little background about themselves, where they started, how they began, and what brought you to dance. So if you would like to share that with the listeners.
Oh, I'd be thrilled to. I am an immigrant child. I came to this country from Cuba with my family in 1969. And we were an immigrant family. We didn't have the resources nor the know-how yet to see how everything worked in this country. So for me, I like to say that I just always stumbled upon things or things came to me, which I'm very blessed to. So I didn't have any formal dance training as a young man. It wasn't until 8th grade that I was part of a musical because of this artist teacher who came in and took over our class. I had the role of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, the Linus role, and he dances with his blanket. And I everything came together. I loved music, movement, the artistry of it all, and the bug stung me. And then from there on, my family didn't have the resources to send me to school, so I found dance school. That is, I found many different ways of doing so. So when I went to I kept doing all the shows in all the other schools. I was in a small parochial Catholic school.
Me
And
too.
yes, in Bronx. And so, I started when I was in high school, I was in an all-boys school. So we worked with the all-girls schools and we did musicals together throughout that year. I left that and started capoeira class, which is a Brazilian martial arts that has a lot of dance and is rigorous, just like dance, with warm up. The teacher said, I know you're interested in dance, you're talented, go next door and start taking ballet class. So I would sneak into ballet class because I didn't want to tell my family that I was going to ballet class. They thought I was taking capoeira class. And then, I just started doing that. I was, I like to say like I was a New York City rat going from one place to another, trying to find my passion, which was dance. And all at the same time doing schoolwork, being very good at school. And it was just a passion that I couldn't ignore. And then I got a scholarship at Ailey. I got a scholarship at the Graham School for a summer. Just started building the technique. And when it was time to go to college, I went to Adelphi University that had an amazing dance program with these incredible teachers. I learned so much. And then at that time, I was also dancing in smaller dance companies, working all kinds of dance jobs that I could get during the summer, weekends. And I was about to graduate. I was doing a few auditions here and there. I looked in the back of Dance Magazine, saw Ballet Hispánico. I was like, Ballet Hispánico? Didn't know why I didn't hear about it like the major dance companies. So I came, took a class, and the artistic director offered me a job then.
Wow, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing all that. And I want to pull out a few things, excuse me, that you said because I love when I hear artist background, and then also when I find like little similarities or connections that I find of my own background. And like you said too, I went to parochial school as well. But first I just want to back up that you were an immigrant, that you emigrated from Cuba. And I, first of all, I just find that so brave when families do that from any country. I find it so brave. I hit several years ago, I was trying to find my background. My dad is first generation Irish, so his mom and dad lived in New York City. They came over through Ellis Island, and I was on this search to find those roots. And I found myself being so grateful to my grandparents and my ancestors for all they sacrificed for me to be here. And so when I hear stories for you, first generation being here, I just find it so brave that you came. Do you remember those times as a little child? Do you remember what that was like for you at that time?
Oh, of course you don't. There is a very, and I don't want to use the term traumatic, but it is for a child. There's a little
Mhm.
bit of trauma where you're learning a language where you don't feel like you fit in, where you feel like a stranger. I remember taking my lunch to school and it was different than everybody else's lunch, and I was so embarrassed because it wasn't the American lunch, right? But it's what I love to eat. And so I would hide during lunchtime, go outside and have my lunch because, you were bullied or made fun of.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are you having there? What is that? Ew, that's disgusting. So those are traumatic
Mhm.
moments and so that whole idea that we now understand of a sense of belonging um, was hard to find, right? But I found it immediately in dance.
Yeah, yeah.
I felt like, that the audience reaction, the idea of working as an ensemble with
Mhm.
people, community, no matter everyone else, if they, bothered you, this community was supporting you and what you were doing.
Yes,
And so that is so important for young people. My assimilation process was very different than now. I mean, um, that was a long time ago. And, right now we have at instant information in your hands. At that time, you didn't. So it was a longer process for you to understand how things work in this structure, in this new structure.
yeah.
So your parents who were already, mid-aged,
Mhm.
it was even harder for them to learn. So you were learning quicker as a young child, and so you were helping also.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, so that's why I use the term traumatic,
Mhm.
because you're being pushed
Yeah.
into quickly assimilating so you can feel like you belong.
Yes. And I like what you said too about, dance and that acceptance in dance and what dance does. Because I know for myself too, I came to dance late. I didn't start taking formal dance classes until I was 13. And
Mm,
that's late, but like you said earlier, I caught the bug too. And like you said, I was a very good student, on that path of doing, college, all that. But I couldn't get dance out of my mind either. And it was just like I had to do it. And you mentioned Alien. I've shared this several different times on my podcast, is that it was revelations for me when I was 19 years old and I saw in Paris, I was doing my junior year abroad. I saw a performance of Revelations and I sat in that audience and I said, I have to do that. And I think we have those moments as artists and dancers that make us know deep down inside of us that we have to do it. And I think part of it is the expression, is that feeling of belonging, community, all those things that you said. And I read somewhere about how dance education, you believe in dance education, and I believe the company promotes that and really spearheads a lot of that. Can you talk about that, the dance education, that sector or section, I should say, of Ballet Hispánico that you do there at the company
of
and the
course,
school?
of course. So I think that when Tina founded this organization, she was focused on giving over the ability to find careers and a place in the arts to these young people. She took over her mentor, Lola Bravo's studio, and she really didn't want, she liked to teach, but she didn't want to run something. But she agreed to for a year. Well, a year turned into a dance company, right? And what she was very interested is in, it was so funny, above all, she was interested in that financial security for kids, for Latinx kids in the city. And you have to remember, in 1970, it was a very different city here. You know, the city was left. Everybody moved to the suburbs, and, you know, black and brown communities were left in these hollows, these shells of buildings, you know. It was really hard. There were gangs and everything. So she was able to bring kids from our neighborhoods and give them these opportunities. And I think that is the backbone of Ballet Hispánico, always being a beacon and a safe space for people to find themselves in this art form,
Yeah.
whether they go on or not as a
Right.
dancer. They, we really focus in our School of Dance and in our community arts partnerships, and I can tell you the difference, on building the joy of the arts, on building citizens of the world that would not have had this opportunity because of what they look like, their body type, their financial situation. And so that's what we still do today. In the School of Dance, we're focused on training dancers for a very eclectic world of dance right now.
Yes.
And so, you know, we focus on what Tina focused on, which was flamenco or Spanish dances. There are, you know, in her, she loved the different forms of Spanish dance. She felt that was important instead of just flamenco, classical ballet, and then contemporary forms. Through the years, we've also added folk forms, Latin folk forms that are very important for me because we have to include the Afro diaspora, the African diaspora that is in our culture. And so we give that opportunity. We do a lot of fundraising for scholarships. We have scholarships throughout all of the school programs. We have introductory classes, you know, the whole
Sure.
gamut. And then we have community arts partnership, which is our engagement and education arm for public schools and for the general public. So, you know, not everyone's going to be a dancer, but we feel very strongly that, and Tina felt very strongly that every child should have arts education as
Yes.
part of their curriculum.
Yes. I agree.
I agree also. And you know that in this country, we don't have that, you know. It is one of those things. And so, but I think organizations like Ballet Hispánico are here to fill that hole. So we work with 40 different public schools. We have
Wow.
residencies from, you know, a month to 6 months. The students get to learn dances from Latin America and then have a little performance. But they get cultural enrichment, which is so important. So those are the two areas of education for Ballet Hispánico.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. And I love how you said cultural enrichment. And that I love that. I find myself, you know, if I travel somewhere, I want to see what dance is going on. Or if say if I'm walking down the street and I hear music and I see some kind of dance going on, I stop and I want to see it. And I love to experience that. And I think the culture aspect is so important because it makes us who we are. And you know, and here in the United States, especially now, if you're going from, you know, 1970, whatever, until now, like you said, it was different all those years ago to here. We've made a lot of progress. We still have a lot of progress to go. However, the integration of the cultures and being exposed to different cultures and their dance and what they do, from the costuming, the colors, the rich music, I think is so important. And I love that a company like yours has that to offer. Can you talk about, you know, your programs, and I mean your performance programs, because I know you just had, what was it, your 15th anniversary. but the anniversary of Ballet Hispánico and what your seasons look like and what your choreography, the choreographers you bring in, what a dance program, concert will wind up looking like, and what kind of artists you bring in.
Wow, that's
Abroad.
try and get it. I would try and get all of it. I love all the questions. So we're a touring. The professional company is very much a touring company. We tour between 15 to 20 weeks a year,
Wow, that's great.
which is a lot of touring.
Mhm.
This year was, and it's wonderful. So we have to be a very flexible organization. We have to be, the dancers have to be remarkable because they are. Um, we are a repertory company, which means we focus on bringing in works of art that are not just one genre, right? Because to begin with, the Latinidad, the Latin cultures are not a monolith. They're multiple cultures, multiple diasporas that have intersected to make us who we are. And so my approach, my vision is to always try to engage our audience with that kind of information through this contemporary vision. So I usually um, ask a dance maker or choreographer, you know, so what are you thinking about your culture? What are some of the things? Is it music? And it doesn't need to be a cultural statement. It's just, is there music? Is there traditions? Are there narratives? We just got through the pandemic and the social justice movement that taught us that we need better and new narratives that engage and make everyone feel like they belong. Ballet Hispanico has been doing that for 55 years. We're coming on to our 55th anniversary. And so when I program something, the first thing is, what is that? Well, what are we going to talk about now? And what can we bring through the process of these choreographers? They come from everything from something very contemporary to something classically contemporary, you know, uh, ballet. Um, it's arranged because there's so many Latina choreographers out there in different genres and areas of art. So usually we have when we tour, it's 3 ballets, so the triple bill. But, you know, 4 years ago, we built our first full-length work, which was Doña Perón by Annabelle Lopez Ochoa.
Wow.
So for me, it was important that this company now in its 55th year starts building on these. What is a narrative? And, a narrative can't be just a 20, 30-minute piece.
Mhm,
You really need to sit to develop these new stories.
mhm.
Doña Perón, or The Life of Evita, was a perfect moment to, one, bring in a Latina choreographer speaking about a Latina narrative and changing the idea of the stories that have been built by men, first of all, and by non-Latinos. So I'm trying to give, it's not that I'm giving authenticity, I'm trying to give that nuance of cultural relevance.
That's wonderful. Continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
please. And so that is, so I'm telling you all this because it tells you why I program the way I do. And so I'm always looking for young choreographers, for emerging choreographers, but also choreographers that there are a lot of Latina choreographers that have been doing work that just have been gone unrecognized
Yeah.
for many different reasons.
And then how do you get your choreographers? If they have gone unrecognized, how are you searching them out, or are they sending you like a random, like, here is my reel, here's my website, here's my resume, I would love to do some work for you. Is it both those things, and the networking? How is that
All of
happening?
the above.
All of
All
the
of the
above. Yeah.
I see a lot of work. I go see work. I have a network. I've worked with a lot of people, so there's that. And the network is important because sometimes you can't be in every. I mean, you know, you can't be in all the countries all the time. It's very expensive for it.
Yeah.
So that's very important. We have a season at City Center, usually in the spring, and then the rest of the time we're on tour.
On tour, which I think is fabulous to be able to sustain a tour, a yearly tour like that. I say that because for the listeners to understand, it's important for a company to tour. First of all, it's important for the dancers to work, right? And then when they're touring, to have that ability to do that, because it's expensive to go on tour. So I think that's wonderful. And what did you say? It was like 15 weeks at least, throughout 15 to 20 weeks through the year. That's a lot of time touring. And like you said, the dancers to sustain that type of lifestyle, which is really important as well. Let's talk about the company for.
Can I just add one thing about touring?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think what from the audiences and talkbacks and all that, touring looks like something so glamorous,
Right.
and it can feel that. It's a lot of work. The interesting thing to me about touring for an artist, because I toured so much, is the ability it gives you to grow your artistry, because you are not, your home audience thrills you, loves you, knows you. There's something about it. But to listen to an audience when you're performing, to understand how that communication is going or not going, to revisit yourself in different spaces and what you to do, you grow as an artist. I always tell dancers, you grow in the work. The work makes you grow. You can feel like you come out of Juilliard and you've worked with this, you did this. It's not the same until you start working in a company touring.
Yeah.
The growth is remarkable.
Yeah. Thank you.
I meant any kind of conservatory or school.
Yes, of
Juilliard
course.
just came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That is the beginning. The work starts in that ensemble, in working with a group constantly, in that kind of inquiry about your artistic self on stage.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And you said something as well that I find fascinating. And all the artists and dancers out there and performers will relate to that. You talked about listening to the audience, how the audience is responding to what you're performing. That's so important, because I just remember myself being on stage. You could read the audience while you're performing. You feel it, you hear it, and it doesn't mean necessarily by their applause or what have you. It's that silence, right? It's
I'm
the
so glad you're
silence.
saying that. I'm so glad you're saying that, because today's generation, no diss on today's generation, love y'all. But today's generation thinks it's all about judgment. Yay, that's what we have in front of our palms. Did I get a like? Did I get a love? No. There's a communication that happens when you're on stage.
You give me goosebumps. Yeah, there really is.
Communication, and I loved that communication.
Yes.
That's what got me into this.
Yes.
I loved bringing an audience into this, whatever was going on around me. It was important. And I'm not talking about facial expression, makeup, or that's not it. The intentionality of your movement, the integrating all of your artistic powers to get a message across, or get a feeling across, or get, it could be just, here is this message that this choreographer has put in front of you, and I'm adding to that. I'm giving you something. That's something that, I wish more people talked about that.
Yeah, and I want to add to that as well, because it's an experience, and it's an experience for the artist on stage too, because it's, I found, and I'll speak from my own experience, and it wasn't about, oh, look at me. It was, like you said, you knew that something was happening. There was that communication in the silence happening between you and the audience. You were drawing them in, they were drawing you out, and it happens. And then you're doing your job, because you're telling the story on another level that goes way beyond, to me, in my experience, just what you are moving on stage. It's like when people talk about, muscle memory. You're rehearsing, and then you have to let everything you have to surrender, I always feel like empty yourself, surrender, and let the story and the choreography, everything take over so that you can communicate. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and I think that the communication is something that's very primal, that kind of, I mean, the performing arts are still to me, the last bastion of really trying to almost connect in such a powerful way, because just think about it. We sit as a group in a dark space and we are all in communion. We're all trying to figure it out both individually and collectively. And please, I mean, not figure it out. We're all, yes, but we're all trying to see where we come together. And sometimes there's that moment where you feel the audience is together. And it's not only because they understand, because there is a communion going on, and a communication going on. And I think that's something that we need to cherish, because we don't have that anymore. Everything
Yeah.
is high level, sports, and am I winning? Am I not winning? And art form, the arts gives you the opportunity just to sit with things
Yeah. Yeah.
and be confused. It's okay when I speak to audiences who tell me, should I get it? No, it's okay, don't get it.
Yeah.
And then come back and see it again and see if you
Yeah.
get it. That's another thing that dance is not a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
Come back. You
Yeah.
come back to that same piece,
Yeah.
because every work is done once and then it changes somehow or other.
Yes.
The
That's
people on stage, because of someone has a stomach ache,
yeah.
it's never exactly the same. So it's fleeting, and that to me is just gorgeous.
Yes. Well,
The
that's beautiful.
impermanence of that.
Yeah.
You were in a moment.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. And it's like it's living, and
Yeah.
it's living and fleeting at the same time, right? And when you talk about going back and seeing something again, because you have a different experience, you see it differently, or the audience, you as the audience member is in a different space, and something else might move you or touch you, or a different dancer in the role might move and touch you differently. It's so as you can tell, I'm sure I love dance. This is why I do this. But, I do like you talk about, dance education is so, so important. And I really hope that our country keeps moving and moving more into that arena of exposing people, young, old, and everywhere in between, more and more, to what dance has to offer.
We've learned that children have different modalities of learning.
Mhm.
It's been researched, it's been documented. So why are we holding it back?
Yes.
Um, I'm the perfect example of a kid in school, immigrant, saved by this art form. Many of my peers and people I grew up with have passed. They were, it was a rough time. You were drawn into things. It was an escape. And so if we can just realize that it's not only sports
Oh,
that
yes.
does,
Yeah, yeah, and it's beautiful. For me, I find dance so beautiful. And even if it's dealing with something not so nice, I think it can just create so much beauty. And that's what I find so attractive and important. And what I'm drawn to.
I think the dance world recognizes that and
Mhm.
recognizes that importance, and we shout it out
Yeah.
to the tops, right?
Yes.
I think again, it's our governments, our leadership, that structure is really hard. And in New York City, it's better than any other place,
Yes. Yes. It's
right? Because we have
yes.
there's access here in New York,
Yes, there really is.
goodness. But
Yes.
we travel out there, and it's the first time a young child will see themselves reflected on stage, or maybe we do a workshop, or maybe we do a kids program. And I everybody has to realize how much that changes people.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I really agree. I want to talk about your dancers, the dancers in the company. Just what do you look for when you are auditioning dancers? when you, or perhaps you see somebody that you think, wow, they would be perfect for the company.
Mhm.
What is that for you?
I think it's really for those of us who have been in the field for a long time, we can walk into a room and understand the technique that someone has, their joy for the work. I mean, it's evident. You live and breathe it. I mean, walk into an audition, I'm like, yes, yeah, 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 yeah. But for me, the biggest thing is personality, because we talked about reaching out to the audience. I feel that it's so important to do that. And, I usually end up with these incredibly wonderful, full of character and joy. And that's what I love. I love that. That's
Yeah,
very important to me,
yeah,
because if it's not there, then it doesn't work.
yeah,
It really doesn't work for this work,
yeah, yeah,
not for it, for this work.
yeah,
So along with the technique, we all love good risk takers who understand what risks mean, and in terms of trying different ways of movement, approaching the work, understanding choreographers, taking in information, giving it back, all of that good stuff that we have. That's great. But I look for wonderful personalities, and I have a group of just amazing human beings who are loving, and you could just tell. You
yeah.
walk in, you sit down, and they're like, "Who are I want to be their friends."
Yeah, see, yeah, it's great, and it's true too. I find, I had just come back from, I was 7 weeks out in South Bend working on a new ballet, and I was the dramaturg and the assistant, and had so much fun watching the dancers, like out seeing personalities emerge, and dancers I find, myself included. I remember when I was in a company, you just are silly. You have the capability to just be silly, because you're using your body all the time, right? You're but not speaking often, and so your communication is through your body and your movement. But I think you also have to give over yourself so that you can serve the piece that you're working on, and whether it's the rehearsal process or a class or whatever you're working on. But so a lot of those inhibitions go away and you can just be free. And I think the freer you are, it opens yourself up to communicate the work better and more deeply and on a profound level. That's just my
I
thoughts
think
on
out
that.
of all the art forms, dance connects us to our inner child the most.
Yes, that's well said. Yes, yes.
It's a corporal art form.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, yes, and we can sit down and talk about the bad things that come along with
of
that. That
course.
you in the mirror, that
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that you
yeah,
have to. I think this generation knows how to look for that and pushes it away. Certainly, our generation, you
yeah,
know, our
yeah,
feelings with coming
yeah,
to terms with
yeah,
one, the mirror,
yeah,
and two, people telling you you're not good enough or things.
yeah, yeah,
So self-empowerment is much stronger now. However, I think that still this art form is so connected to that child who loves to move and dance and, take space. That is such a childlike thing. Own space, right? To grab it and make it yours. You see kids doing that with no fear
yeah. No
and
inhibition.
to
Yeah.
run after them, right?
Yes, yes, it's so true. Oh my gosh. No, that's so well said. That's really, really well said. Um, but again, back to your dancers, um, when you're creating a piece, or you're still choreographing, correct?
Yes.
So when you're creating a piece, or I should say, when you decide to create a piece, and I suppose it probably depends on, again, what your programming is. But what stirs you the most to choose to present something, to say, that's what I want to do, or that's what I need to do? Where does that inspiration come from?
Two places. One, I'm very much a music lover.
Well,
I'm not afraid to say it.
yeah,
There's so many thoughts about, moving away from the music, not using music and all that. That's great. I love all of it. I was brought up around music.
yes, yeah,
And so I think music speaks to me, and sometimes there are pieces that I that I hear that then take me to another place.
Mhm.
And I say, I have to explore that. And the other thing is just my vision for this organization, for who I am. How am I going to share my culture? How am I going to bring some new way of looking at who we are as Latine people to the world? Those are
Yes.
the two.
I love it. That's great. I also found, I'm gonna go back to when I was away this summer. The choreographer that I was working on, she loves music too. So she really, like, when you say that how much you love music, she loves music too. She will listen and listen to music, and it drives. I don't mean drives her in a bad way, but it propels her in what she creates. And I see her, because I work so closely with her as the assistant and the dramaturg for her. It's so fascinating for me to watch her interpret the music, because I'm hearing something and she's hearing something, and then it's going on some way in my head, and then I see her do something. So that process, to be intimate with that process, is fascinating. And the rehearsal process, I love the rehearsal process. Can you talk about what your rehearsal process is like for the listeners?
Yes, I mean it all depends on the project
Mhm.
I'm working on. I usually love to do some writing first with the dancers. I give notebooks. I say let's take notes. Let's do this. I sometimes do improvisational um, uh, uh, exercises in order to stimulate movement, invention from them. And then usually I take that and then manipulate it and add my own. I do love adding my movement. And then I start crafting from there.
Yeah.
So it's
I
multi-layered,
like that.
and it develops as it comes along.
Nice. No, I love that. And that's very similar to a choreographer I worked with. So I love that way of working. Can we talk about, I read something, I'm just going to read it. It was I think it was on the website, if I'm not mistaken. It was either on a website or another interview you had done.
Okay.
And it's a little long, but I'm going to read it anyway because I want you to talk about it. You probably touched on parts of it, but I just want you to talk about it a little bit more. And you say the extraordinary act of Latina immigrant embarking on a journey of access to the arts for a community is a heroic example of artistic advocacy. When thinking of the years, the families, the students, the artists, and the administrators whose lives Ballet Hispánico changed, one cannot help but wonder in amazement at the power of such vision. It was the idea of service for a marginalized and silenced community that made Tina Ramirez's founding of Ballet Hispánico unparalleled. Now, I know you talked a lot about that already, but can you dive a little bit more into that statement that you made?
I love hearing that statement. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
What I meant by that is, again, 1970, um, we Latinos, Latinas had been put in a box. We were all Hispanic. It was a different term. And, we weren't given the fullness of our culture. Um, for a woman in the 70s to decide to become a leader, first of all, that is heroic. But what she was doing was advocacy work for her community by building a space, by building a vision that allowed them to see themselves reflected and then to revel in their um, in their culture. When around what was happening is that everyone was saying their culture, you were a thief, you were a maid, you were this, you were that. The information that we were getting outside, again, this is before
Yes.
personal computers and iPhones. The information you got from the media, you know, if you saw a Latinx person on TV, they were one of those very stereotypical bad. We were often the other.
Mhm.
This is, you know, and so that is heroic. That is putting a stake in the ground and saying, I'm going to change everybody's mind
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah. 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 That's
And then
yeah.
giving back um, that idea of financial security, which is, these dancers that came, these young dancers, they needed to learn what to do with a paycheck, how to do this, how to do that. And Tina, I have to do. major props. Tina was always concerned with that. And her and I would always talk about, so what does this class need? What does that, we, I remember her and I put together a 2 week, and we did it again this past year, 2 week program for migrant kids who at that time were living in temporary shelters. It was a big shelter, temporary housing for homeless people at that time also. She was interested in building opportunity for the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's advocacy in my estimation.
Yeah, which is so powerful. And when I hear you talking about it, and I hear you talking about the 2 weeks that you did, I see in my mind's eye, the fear that must be on these kids, these kids' faces, and then to have somebody reach out and love them, right? And
That's it.
to love them and to be like, we love you and let's have some fun, right? Yeah,
Let's learn something. Let's have some fun.
yeah,
Let's find out, if this is something for you or
yeah.
or not.
Yeah, and it reminds me, and again, I'll say it just briefly because it just brings me back to it was last summer when I was meeting somebody in the city. We were going to see a show, and I had crossed one of the lines of the buses, coming in, filtering in all the immigrants and the migrants, I should say. And I remember the kids. You talk about the kids. And I often say it to my husband now. I'll never forget some of those faces of how frightened they looked. And it made it touched me so deeply um, that the rest of the night I couldn't pay attention to what I was watching. But and I say it, I don't really often get political on my podcast, but I say it for listeners to understand that these are just kids, right? And they're coming for a better life, right or wrong, how they did it, right or wrong, but their parents' best interest is for their family, right? That's all I have to say on that. And it was just so powerful. So kudos to you to be doing that kind of work, and that kind of work that's so important in the community and for kids. Advocating for kids is so important. I don't know if you want to, excuse me, add anything to that.
No, I thank you so much for that. That is why Ballet Hispánico is here. I love that you say they're kids, and I'm just gonna go one step further and say they're all humans. And so, if we could just continue to find the humanity in what we do, and I think the arts give us those windows. And maybe that's why they're keeping them out of the school. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But it does give you a window into humanity. It forces you to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of the time, those are it's uncomfortable to meet someone new, to understand something new, but it's so important. And that's why, the arts give children an opportunity to go beyond themselves and who they are, where they've grown up, and come face to face and set their own parameters around how they view something. But I think it's really important if we could just find that human element again, that not everyone is here to do something horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. And so I think, we continue to do the work of teaching how to be a creative individual, and because creativity is in all of us. And if we can just if we give it to our children early on, imagine they're better people no matter what they do.
Yes. Yes.
They stand up taller.
Yes. So true. Right.
You stand up taller, you walk in difference, there's a confidence building, the same things that people talk about sports, and then some.
And then some. Yes.
Because you learn how to use this.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not physical, I'm going to get you. It's
Yes.
physical. How am I in
Yes.
this space? How do I course correct? So the executive skills that are built for young people in dance, in the arts, are, unbelievable.
Yes, they really are. I think unparalleled. And I say one more thing about that too, is like, as you were talking to it just reminds me that, art and artists, we're the voices of humanity, the voices of humanity, which I think is so, so important. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the dual roles you hold. So you became artistic director, if I'm not mistaken. I have written down 2009. Is that correct? And then in 2015, you became CEO. So talk about the dual roles, and I imagine they must overlap, but why the role of CEO?
Um, Look, for many reasons, we could not find an executive director that was um, that was able to understand this bigger vision, right? And I had formed my own company, Luna Negra Dance Theater in Chicago. So I had accumulated a lot of those executive skills. And so the board said, hey, why don't you try, pretty much you're running the organization already. Why don't you just try doing that?
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't just off the cuff. There was a lot of thinking
Sure.
around it and understanding what that would need in terms of my support, the support around an executive team that would be important for that. Um, I have the ability to use both sides of my brain. I think this new generation is what I'm most excited about. This new generation knows how to be entrepreneurs. They
Yes.
immediately are on
Yes.
doing things. And I think I mean, if you think about Graham,
Hmm.
you think about even before that in the ballet world, the impresarios, the artistic directors, these were entrepreneurs. They built communities, they built organizations. Um, and yes, there is this false, it turned into, the fabulous artistic director doing nothing but sitting in the front, but it's not like that. That is vision,
Hmm.
what it truly is. And so I just expanded on that side and um, have been the person making the big decisions because I understand the organization. I've been here since I
Yeah.
was 21.
Yeah. Wow.
Even though I had a little break in between and did my own thing, I came back. And so it's in my DNA,
Yes.
Ballet Hispánico. And as we move forward, I'm hopeful that someone else will later on in the future that understands and comes through this because
Yeah.
this is a very particular
Yeah.
mission and vision and cultural organization
Yeah.
that serves everyone, but with this focus on Latinx. I hope I answered your
You
question.
did. I just found it fascinating because I had never seen, an artist. Maybe there is somewhere, but I just hadn't seen
There's a
it.
couple. There's a
Okay, so I just was like, oh, how interesting to have the dual role, but it does make perfect sense. It makes absolute perfect sense when you can handle and you know how and what's needed. I think that's really great. Um,
You need a specific
Skill
support
set.
system
Yes.
around
Yeah.
and skill set,
Yeah. No, that's wonderful.
and it's not easy.
No, no. I had a dance studio for 23 years, so I wore many, many hats. So yes, it takes but you love it. And that's why you do it. I wanted to ask you, do you ever have those moments where you sit back and you think of that little 6-year-old boy who, came from Cuba and you have accomplished so much. I haven't even mentioned all the awards you've won. So congratulations on all those wonderful awards and accolades. But
Thank you.
you're welcome. Do you ever take that moment and just, you think, wow, wow, you know, what's that like? I know I don't mean it as a prideful thing, but when you take those moments, it's quite an accomplishment.
Well, thanks. I think always surround with yourself with people that you've worked with from the past and friends because my friends are the ones who remind me of my family, who remind me of that. I'm still an immigrant in heart, and so we're just focused. So what's next? I have trouble with sitting back, and I do it now. I mean, I just had a really big, not a really big, but a big birthday, and I've been reflecting a little bit more because now I feel so in my skin these days. that I'm able to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gone through such processes of understanding where I belong and who I am,
Well,
um, that it's taken this long to finally start to see all of that.
yeah.
I'm proud of all the work. I can say that,
Well,
and I
yeah.
get it. But there's a little thing in this, like my little immigrant devil. It says, "Next, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do now?"
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of an artist too. We're always, I think, searching and doing. But I know when I look at all you've done and read all you've done and just speaking to you now, it's, it's admirable. And I say it in the most, non-cliche way. It really is admirable. And I mean it when I say, when I hear people who immigrate, especially from Cuba. When I hear something like that, because I had someone who worked for me, and why I say that, why I really took a peak interest when your name came across, my desk. I had a young woman who worked for me whose parents came. They, secretly left Cuba. And the story I get goosebumps when I tell you the story she told me and shared with me. I just felt like I had to honor her and just all she did, because for somebody who was born here, you forget sometimes, you forget and you can take for granted. But when you hear people's stories, and everybody has a story, I think we have to honor those, is my
Yes,
point. Yeah.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
stories have to be told because in the story we find ourselves.
Yes, yes. And and the people who are just like us, like you said, we're all human beings. And I love the stories. And I'm so grateful you're sharing yours with mine. Is with me, I mean, is there anything that we haven't talked about or you want to talk about? Is there anything coming up that you want to let the listeners know? Um,
Besides, this is our 55th anniversary
yeah.
season. I'm excited.
Wow.
We are putting together our Carmen Macchia, which is
Wow.
the other Carmen uh, ballet, and it's going to be fantastic. And, we continue to do the work that Tina started and uplift these voices and these young students. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to lead this organization.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo. You're doing a wonderful job. It's
I so
fascinating.
appreciate that. Thank you. And
You're
thank you for having me in this beautiful conversation.
thank you. You're welcome. It's been my pleasure and honor. This is Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Uh,
Powered by Riverside.